All right, welcome back, Admin Mastermind, for your weekly recap. And man, Jeff, we had a whole crew this morning. Awesome conversation. And actually, I wanted to share kind of a scenario that I posed at the beginning of the session. And
Yeah, for sure.
you
Got
know,
good conversation around it. Yeah.
good conversation. It was probably the majority. Just a reminder, though, for those who are hitting this for the first time, we have Admin Mastermind every Tuesday morning, 9 a.m. Eastern Time, and then also in the afternoon, evening time, depending on your time zone, but 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And yeah, we have a free sign up at teachbetter.com/mastermind. But the scenario was that I was helping coach an administrator, and they had talked about feedback, which was something that we discussed a little bit last week. Actually, there was a majority of the conversation last week. And this, though, was kind of flipped on its head, right? It was actually feedback to administrators about changes
Yeah.
that they could make within their leadership style. And so the problem wasn't that the feedback was incorrect. They actually agreed with the feedback. However, the delivery was very harsh. And because of that delivery style, it was very hard to actually listen to the words that were being spoken and understand that the feedback was actually truthful and some changes did need to happen. But I think just with human nature and being a leader, saying, there's a portion of that I did disliked it. I don't want to change because of the delivery system, and we kind of had to like back it up and be like, well, let's dive into that deeper. But I want to kind of throw it to your way because a lot of great conversation, a lot of input, resources, whatnot that we're throwing out this morning.
Yeah, and it was kind of cool. This was like a continuation. Like you mentioned last week was a lot about feedback, but even 2 weeks ago, it
Mm-hmm.
crept in and then it kind of continued last week. We've talked a lot about creating the atmosphere and the culture that encourage feedback both ways, right? From our leadership down and vice versa, which is why this worked really well. And I think really resonated with the group because those that have been here in the previous couple weeks, and there were some new folks that haven't been there for a while today as well. It kind of hit because again, it was so obviously the person in the scenario felt that they could provide feedback and they had good feedback. It was actually really good critical feedback that's likely going to be put in place, but it was delivered in a unprofessional, not very effective way. And so that led us to the conversation like, how do we create that? And Chad kind of started us off by mentioned like, hey, like we create the avenues for that feedback to happen professionally and naturally, or it's going to create itself. So just like we talked about in the last couple of weeks about creating that culture and that environment where people feel like they can give feedback, we have to do that by modeling what we want to do and how we want feedback and that we want to receive feedback and we want to give feedback. Well, it's the same with how we want it to be delivered. It's the same thing. We've got to model. It's crazy how often it's crazy, Josh, how often the conversations that we have anything to do with how we want our staff to do things or act, whatever, comes back to we have to model it ourselves. Like that's one of the key components. But we talked about, and you mentioned like the human nature, right? Like, so if something's feedback is even feedback that is good, if it is delivered in an unhealthy or unprofessional way, or at an unprofessional or unhealthy time, it can you need to address it as a leader because that can affect not just you potentially personally, even if you have a thick skin, it can still get you. But it can also impact the culture because of the way it's brought, right? Because if someone watches someone else deliver feedback in a unprofessional or a negative tone, whatever, they're now going to be worried about how they're going to get that feedback, or they might just assume that's how we get things done, right? Well, that was part of the conversation was, well, if we let unprofessional or unhealthy feedback then actually be put in place, we're setting a tone that that's how you should deliver it, and that's just going to create problems. I thought one of the things that someone said that I thought was really incredible is they said, how did he say it? He said that teachers come to school as themselves, not as some sort of persona of who they are. So when you give negative feedback or poorly delivered feedback, it hits them personally. And he reminded us all that administrators are educators too, are teachers too, right? Where we don't come in this like, oh, he or she is giving that feedback to the character I'm playing as this leader or as a teacher. It's me. Like this is part of me, and that sort of human nature can make you really take it the wrong way. And so we talked about really making an intentional space for feedback, Um, Emphasizing and really modeling the importance of not just the fact the feedback needs to happen is crucial to our success and our growth and the success of our students, but also the way in which and the where of which in which it is delivered is also important. So it's all coming back to creating that environment, putting systems in place, um, and uh, and creating those systems in those spaces for people to deliver the feedback the right way, so that we can grow from it versus it potentially causing any friction. So, I think it was a really great, a good conversation. I mean, really great conversation. Tell everyone jumped in a lot. We did talk about one of the things, Josh, not to keep blabbering on here, that making sure that we are willing to and be ready and willing to tell someone if they deliver feedback in a hurtful way or incorrectly, say like,
Yeah.
"Hey, I actually appreciated the feedback, but the way in which you deliver it kind of made me feel X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
Was that your intention?" And if they say, "Oh my gosh, no, of course not." So, okay, great. Can we do it like this next time? It's just having those conversations. If you're building that culture all around of this is how we want feedback and want to do that, like this should be a part of it. And so I thought it was a really good conversation to kind of wrap up the last couple of weeks of talking around feedback for sure.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think the environment, the tone, the words that are used, I mean, all of those things can be something that
Oh yeah,
turns the conversation completely in a different direction. And somebody had actually said, like, they got negative feedback in a staff meeting. Well, obviously, that's not the environment and the setting that needs to occur. And
yeah,
if that is where you're asking for feedback from your staff, like probably doing it in a way that's anonymous, or maybe in a small group or individual.
yeah,
I mean, having a forum of potentially 100, 150 staff members, all having maybe a listening to what would be an intimate conversation. Probably not the best, situation, like you were
yeah,
talking about with your
yeah.
protocols and your systems that need to be put in place for feedback. So, yeah, love the conversation this morning. Um, we also talked about professional development too on the back end of the conversation.
Yeah.
So, what else was discussed there?
Yeah, so we talked about we just kind of posed a little lighter, I think, slightly
Hmm.
lighter conversation around what you're doing to focus on your own personal. We said personal and professional development, and a
Yep.
lot of stuff came flying, and there was a lot of people dropping in the chat for that one, right? We running, working out was mentioned. Voxer and the conversations in the communities there being mentioned. Working with a coach or having a mentor to help guide you, or flipping that and being a mentor or being a coach that allows you to, wow, in the mix of, and I actually chimed in on this too, like wow, in the mix
Yeah.
of actually doing the coaching with someone, the growth you have as an individual there. I'm fortunate enough to help lead this mastermind as well as our
Mhm.
mastermind, couple masterminds in our educator community, and a couple and another mastermind in a completely different community. And I often, if when I'm in the role of coaching or teaching or whatever that might be, like I get so much out of that. And I think there's opportunity there. We talked about someone mentioned like the idea of like going out and presenting at conferences.
Mhm.
It's like a twofold. One, you're gonna work on your chops. You're gonna be you're gonna grow from going to presenting, but also you're gonna get to go to some cool conferences hopefully
Yeah.
and get that professional
Keynote
development and dive into
speakers,
that.
other
Yeah.
sessions, podcasts. You got they
Actually,
say
some people,
podcasts, yeah.
yeah, right, exactly. Podcast, a
Yeah.
lot of, yeah. Someone I actually wrote my note was like a lot of podcasts is what someone said. So dive into podcasts, like the Teach Better Podcast Network, is a great place to be. Someone actually like shout out to this mastermind itself. Said this mastermind is one of my core assets of coming in and learning and growing. And then I love talking about just connecting with other people in your network and saying and just asking questions and listening, and not being afraid to reach out and go. Even like we had someone who shared that they were thinking about reaching out to someone else in our mastermind, and they didn't because they're like, oh, they probably have a crazy start of the year, so why should I bother my program? My problems. And that other person was like, no, 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 call me. Right? We literally saw it happen in real time, which is really cool. So like digging into that and just leaning into the people that you're connected to, I think is one of the big things too. So podcasts, working out, diving into those books, going to conferences, finding. I think the key, Josh, is finding the medium that works for you and the methods that work for you to continue to be challenged and to grow and to find joy in what you're doing, because we get as leaders get so focused on serving the people that we serve sometimes we forget that we need to grow too. Which honestly, I didn't think about this earlier, Josh. It ties back around to the feedback, right? If we're creating a good environment and a good culture that's going to get good feedback, hopefully we're going to get good feedback delivered the right way. That's going to allow us. I want to be clear also when we say like deliver the right way. Well, that doesn't mean the feedback isn't going to potentially be uncomfortable, because that's just how it is sometimes. But if we create it, and we're able to receive it in the right way, it allows us to grow from that. So I think I just realized that it was kind of a cool bookend with that, and it worked out really well. So
Well, I was going to bridge it to our afternoon session too, because in our afternoon, we were talking about safety and security and how
yeah,
people feel like they're on an island. Like, oh, this threat was only on my school, or my kids are using social media incorrectly, and we're the only ones that are dealing with this. And it's like, no.
no,
And
you're not.
thankfully, it was said during the Admin Mastermind in the evening session was like, you're not alone. We're all dealing with this. This is across the country. Someone had stated that like for 3 days in a row, organically, they heard about a
Mm-hmm.
variety of incidents that were
Yeah.
occurring. I mean, shoot, just turn on the news. There's lockdowns occurring all over the country right now because it's just right now something that's a copycat situation where kids are in a bad way, and then they're seeking attention, negative attention, and they're doing some really really terrible decisions in regards to social media and threats to themselves or to others. And so with that, they were talking about how crazy things are on the campus, and then you're also dealing with some personal side, personal things, and then you don't have much time to really work on yourself in your
Yeah.
leadership, right? And so they were able to come to Admin Mastermind for that growth, but then also, they had a commute, so hitting the podcast on the commute, and
Mm-hmm.
finding other ways to kind of just get a little bit better with just the very small limited amount of time that you have. So I know it's crazy right now for everyone, and I every week I get emails about like, I really want to be there, I can't because X, Y, and Z. But just know we're here for you. We love collaborating with everyone, and it doesn't just stop on Tuesdays. So for those who are watching, who maybe don't join or are just learning about the community, we're there for you Tuesday mornings and evenings. And then this is the link here, teachbetter.com/mastermind. And then when you sign up, Jeff, they get a link that goes to our Facebook community.
Yeah, and that Facebook group, that's where you can jump in at any time. You don't have to wait for the Tuesday meeting. So if you could never make a meeting, that's fine. We get it.
Yep.
That Facebook group is there also for you. So, yep, I love it,
Awesome.
Josh. Great way to
All right,
wrap
man.
up, my friend.
Wonderful.
Well
It was
done.
great seeing you today, Jeff. I got my full cup of Jeff Gargis today, so I feel great.
Good. You should throw
Feel
that cup
ready to
away,
go
but that's good. I'm glad.
I hope everyone has a wonderful week. And of course, if you need anything, Jeff, myself, and the Teach Better team is here for you. Please reach out, and can't wait to see everyone next week.
See ya.